Dogman Declassified, the latest book from W.J. Brendel, Ph.D. Real reports. Consistent patterns, no clear answers. Take a closer look at the evidence. Available now.
Welcome to Forever Paranormal, where shadows remember and silence has a way of speaking. I'm Dr. Bill, your guide through the strange and the unexplainable.
And I'm Deb. Every week we dig into what hides between belief and proof. Cryptids, hauntings, witchcraft, UFO sightings, and the stories people swear are true.
We don't tell you what to believe. We just look at what's possible, what's been witnessed, and what refuses to stay quiet.
If you like what we do, follow, rate, and share the show. It helps keep the lights on.
And if you want to go deeper, step inside the crypt. Patreon members get the show ad-free a full day early and gain access to our entire archives, years of investigations, bonus episodes, and conversations we don't release anywhere else. You can join at foreverparanormal.com or by searching Forever Paranormal The Crypt on Patreon.
And remember that you're never alone. If you ever need someone to talk to, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is 988.
In 1976, 4 friends headed into the Maine wilderness for what should have been an ordinary camping and canoe trip. Years later, they would become part of one of the most famous UFO abduction cases in American history. But decades after the story became known around the world, one of the men at the center of it began questioning whether the memories behind the case were ever real at all. Welcome back to Forever Paranormal, where we know Natinak is more than a myth. Every story is a door between worlds, and this week we step through a case that may tell us as much about memory as it does about UFOs.
I knew there was a catch when you picked this one.
A catch?
Every time you tell me we're doing a UFO episode, we end up talking about something else.
Well, yeah, that's probably fair.
Last time it was military investigations. Before that, it was a government secrecy. Now it's memory.
Well, the UFO part is still there.
For now.
Yeah, for now, but this is one of those cases where the thing people remember isn't necessarily the most interesting part of the story.
That's usually a warning sign.
Well, maybe. Or maybe it's a sign that we're about to wander into one of those subjects where nobody is completely comfortable with the answers.
Which sounds suspiciously like your favorite kind of episode.
Well, yeah, you know me pretty well. Well, because this week we start with the light in the sky, Deb. It starts with 4 friends in the wilderness, and it starts with a story that most UFO researchers have heard at least once. But by the time we're done, we're going to be talking about memory, suggestions, and whether we can always trust what we think we remember.
And if listeners suddenly start remembering embarrassing things from high school, that's not our fault.
Yeah, that's right. No refunds, folks. You know, Deb, I almost got to ask, though, do you have any news for us?
Just that another trove of UFO files have been released recently. Personally, I have not looked at a single one this whole time. Have you?
No, I have not. Not these last ones.
I was going to ask what your impression was.
Well, my impression is the reason they keep spurting them out like this is so they can take away from other things. You know, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world that we supposedly have completed, but we haven't. Things we supposedly have done, but we haven't. So, you know, it's an old magician trick, smoke and mirrors. Well, that's enough on that, though. So,
okay.
Before we get into Allagash case itself, let me ask you something. Have you ever had one of those conversations where you're both talking about the same event and you realize neither one of you remembered the same way?
Constantly, and usually with you.
Well, exactly.
Everybody remembers themselves being the reasonable one.
Or in your case, the right one. Funny how that works, right?
It's amazing how many arguments begin with, "That's what I said."
And usually both people are completely convinced they're right. That's the thing that fascinates me about memory, Deb. We tend to treat it like a recording. We assume that if we remember something clearly enough, then we'll remember it accurately. But that's not necessarily true.
I don't think most people like hearing that.
No, because it means our brains aren't as reliable as we'd like to believe. I mean, the reality is that memory is complicated. It changes, it gets reconstructed, details fade, new information gets mixed in. Sometimes we fill in gaps without even realizing we're doing it. Most of the time, these changes are small. But the problem comes when a memory involves something unusual, something emotional, and something frightening, or something you don't fully understand when it happens.
Which sounds like a UFO sighting.
Well, yeah, it certainly can. And that's one of the reasons the Allagash case remains so interesting. Not because everyone agrees on what happened, it's actually quite the opposite. Because the deeper you get into the story, the less certain things become. The case begins in the summer of 1976. Four friends, Jack Wayner, Jim Wayner, Charlie Foltz, and Chuck Rack, were on a camping and canoe trip in the Allagash Wilderness Waterway in Maine. For people who have never been there, this isn't a city park, it's pretty remote. Even today, there are places where you can spend hours surrounded by forest and water without seeing another person. In 1976, it felt even farther removed from the rest of the world.
Which is probably why they were there in the first place.
Well, yeah, they weren't looking for UFOs, though. They weren't paranormal investigators or conducting experiments or anything. They were young art students, and they were taking a wilderness trip. They were fishing, camping, canoeing, and doing what people have always done when they want to get away from everything for a while. So one evening, they were fishing on Eagle Lake when they noticed this bright object in the sky. At first, it was simply unusual. A light, something distant, something that drew their attention.
By itself, that doesn't sound all that remarkable.
You're right. People see things in the sky they can't identify all the time. Sometimes they remain unidentified. Sometimes there's a perfectly ordinary explanation. And just seeing a light doesn't automatically make something a UFO case, though. What caught their attention was the object's apparent movement. According to later accounts, it seemed to approach their location. As it drew closer, their curiosity began turning into concern.
Well, that's understandable. A strange light is one thing, a strange light moving toward you is another.
Yeah, especially when you're sitting in a canoe at night. There aren't many places to go. What are you going to do? One detail that appears repeatedly in the story, though, is that they begin flashing a flashlight toward the objects.
Sounds like a normal reaction.
I agree, in one way, because people always ask, what would you do in a strange situation? Most of the time, the answer is probably something exactly like that. Wave, flashlight, or yell, thinking it's somebody, or another boat coming towards you or something. You do something to see if whatever you're looking at reacts. According to the story, the object did appear to respond. The men became frightened and paddled toward shore. And that's where things become difficult to evaluate. Because after reaching camp, they noticed something strange. Time seemed to be missing.
The famous missing time.
Yep, the famous missing time. According to their later accounts, far more time had passed than they believed had elapsed. One of the reasons often cited is the condition of the campfire. The fire appeared much slower than expected based on how long they thought they had been gone.
It's interesting, but it's not exactly scientific.
No, and I think that's important to acknowledge. We're not talking about synchronized clocks or documented timestamps or anything. We're talking about people looking at a situation and feeling that something just didn't add up. And you got to admit, that's not the same thing as proving a conclusion. It simply means they believe something unusual had occurred. And honestly, if the story had ended there, we probably wouldn't be discussing it right now.
It'd just be another strange light story.
Probably. A strange light, a confusing night, maybe too much tequila, and a question that never got answered. The reason we're still talking about it nearly 50 years later is because what happened next didn't happen the next day. It didn't even happen the next week. It didn't even happen the next year. Years had passed, quite a few of them, and during that time, something began surfacing that would eventually transform the Allagash case into one of the most famous abduction stories in America. It wasn't new evidence, it wasn't photographs, it wasn't some kind of recovered material, it was memories.
Sounds like this is where it's going to get messy.
Yeah, very messy, because once those memories began appearing, people stopped arguing about what was in the sky, and they start arguing about something far more difficult, whether memory itself can be trusted. One thing that immediately caught my attention when I started digging into this case was how long the gap was.
Between the sighting and the abduction story?
Yeah, because if you look at what happened on the lake, that's pretty straightforward. Four men see something unusual. They think more time has passed than it should have, and whether somebody agrees with that interpretation or not, well, that's just their basic claim. What most people don't realize is that the abduction memories didn't show up right away.
That surprises me too. I always assumed the whole story came out at the same time.
A lot of people do, but years passed before the case became the story that most of us recognize today.
This is where we start having questions.
Why?
Because the longer the gap, the harder it becomes to know what's original and what got added later.
Well, yeah, that's really a fair concern and is very true. And honestly, it's one of the reasons this case remains so controversial. Because according to the men, they began experiencing disturbing dreams connected to the incident. The details varied, but the dreams seemed tied to that night on the lake. The wild part is the dreams didn't begin until 1988.
That's not talking about a few weeks later or even a year later. We're talking about more than a decade.
Yeah, exactly. Roughly 12 years. The trip happened in 1976. The dreams didn't begin surfacing until around 1988. That's one of the details that makes this case so difficult to evaluate. Eventually, those experiences led to hypnotic regression.
I have mixed feelings about that.
Well, you're not alone. As a matter of fact, I'm a certified hypnotist, and I don't have much faith in it.
I understand why investigators use it. If somebody believes part of an experience is missing, I can see why they'd want to explore that. But I've never been convinced it's as reliable as people want it to be.
And that's one of the biggest debates surrounding cases like this, because you have your supporters who argue that hypnosis can help recover memories that aren't easily accessible during your normal memory recall. But then your critics argue that hypnosis can increase the suggestion and your confidence without increasing accuracy at all.
That's the part people forget. Just because somebody becomes more certain doesn't mean they're becoming more correct.
Oh, you've got that right. A person can walk away from hypnotic sessions absolutely convinced something happened. That confidence by itself doesn't tell us whether that memory is accurate at all or not.
So what came out during the regression sessions?
That's the part of the story that most people associate with Allagash. The men described being taken aboard a craft. They described strange beings. They described examinations and procedures. Suddenly, the case wasn't just a sighting anymore. It now becomes an abduction case.
And because there were 4 witnesses, people paid attention.
They did. If one person reports something extraordinary, skeptics often point to perception, memory, or some kind of misunderstanding. When 4 people report similar experiences, the conversation changes completely.
But does it really?
What do you mean?
I keep hearing 4 witnesses as if that's the end of the discussion. But there weren't 4 strangers who happened to see the same thing from different locations. They were friends. They experienced the event together, and they talked about it afterward.
Well, yeah, I have to give you that. And that's an important distinction. Shared experiences can create shared memories, sometimes accurately, sometimes not.
I think most families prove that.
Oh, they do. Everybody has the story where 3 relatives remember the same Thanksgiving completely differently.
Usually with themselves cast as the right one.
Well, yeah, it's funny how that works, right? But you're touching on something important there. Memory isn't isolated. People influence each other constantly. They tell stories, they compare recollections, they unintentionally fill in gaps, and over time, a shared narrative can emerge.
And nobody has to lie for that to happen.
Well, exactly. That's what makes the discussion difficult. We're not talking about fraud. We're talking about human memory and how it works.
Which may be more complicated than fraud.
I think it is, because fraud's pretty easy, because either somebody's making something up or they're not. And memory exists in a much grayer area. People can sincerely remember things that never happened, exactly the way they recall them. And that's been demonstrated repeatedly outside of the UFO world.
So if somebody says, I remember it clearly, that doesn't really settle anything.
No, it doesn't. It tells us the memory feels real to them. That's all. That's valuable information, though, but that's not the same as independent confirmation. And this is where I think listeners need to resist the urge to pick a side too quickly, because there are reasonable questions on both sides.
Such as?
Well, if hypnosis is completely unreliable, why do so many people emerge with memories that feel emotionally powerful and deeply personal? But on the other hand, if hypnosis is uncovering hidden truths, why do psychologists continue warning about suggestion and memory contamination? Neither question is easy to answer.
And both questions can exist at the same time.
Well, yeah, they sure can. And the Allagash case sits right in the middle of that tension. For years, it was presented as one of the strongest multiple witness abduction cases in America. 4 men, a shared experience, similar memories, and for many researchers, that combination carried a lot of weight.
And then came the curveball.
A curveball? Wow, you're using a sports metaphor?
Yep.
All right, well, you've been working with the guys too long. Well, anyway, yeah, a curveball, because just when it seemed everyone was arguing over what happened on the lake, one of the 4 men began to ask a completely different question. Not whether something strange happened, but he asked whether the memories themselves could be trusted.
Well, once that happens, the entire case changes.
It really does, because now we're not discussing UFOs. We're discussing how memory is formed, how it changes, and whether people can come to believe something sincerely without necessarily being historically accurate. And that brings us to Chuck Rack. The thing that makes the Allagash case different from a lot of famous abduction stories is that the controversy didn't come entirely from outside critics. Eventually, it came from inside the story itself.
Chuck Rack.
Chuck Rack, yeah. Years after the case became famous, Rack began publicly expressing doubts about the abduction narrative. He suggested that what emerged through hypnosis may not have been an accurate recovery of hidden memories at all. Instead, he raised the possibility that false memories, media influence, and group dynamics may have played a role.
That's not a small disagreement.
No, it isn't. And if a skeptic says the memories aren't reliable, believers expect that. When one of the participants starts saying it, people really start to pay attention.
So what do we do with that?
Honestly, I think we take it seriously. Not because it automatically disproves the case, but because it forces us to ask harder questions. If 4 people share a memory and one later begins questioning it, does that weaken the entire case? Or does it show we're looking at real people honestly wrestling with what happened to them?
I can see both sides of that.
So can I. I mean, part of me looks at it and thinks the case becomes weaker because one of the original witnesses no longer accepts the story the same way. Well, another part of me looks at it and thinks disagreement is often what real life looks like in people. People don't always arrive at the same conclusion, even when they experience the same event.
Especially after 40 or 50 years.
Exactly. I mean, the older I get, the more cautious I become about certainty. Not because I think nothing happens, not because I think every strange experience is mundane, or has a mundane explanation. I've investigated too many cases for that. But I've also learned that memory is not as simple as we'd like it to be.
I think that's the part people struggle with. We want memories to be evidence.
Yeah, and they are evidence, Deb. They're just not perfect evidence. A witness matters, four witnesses matters, but memory does have limitations. And those limitations don't disappear only because a case involves UFOs.
Which brings us back to the bigger question.
The bigger question, yeah, because this episode was never really about proving an alien abduction case that happened in the Maine wilderness. It's about something much larger. What exactly are we remembering when a memory surfaces more than a decade after an event? In the Allagash case, the original experience and the recovery memories are separated by roughly 12 years. I mean, that's a long time. Long enough for beliefs to change. Long enough for conversations to happen. Long enough for memories to evolve.
And maybe long enough for people to reach different conclusions about the same experience.
Well, yeah, I think that's fair. The truth is, I don't know what happened on Eagle Lake in 1976. I don't know what the four men saw. I don't know whether the memories recovered through hypnosis reflected a real event, a misunderstood event, or something created through a process nobody fully understands at the time. What I do know is that four friends went into the Maine wilderness and came back with a story that people are still debating nearly 50 years later. And maybe that's why the case endures. Not because it gives us answers, but because it doesn't.
Sometimes the mystery survives because the answer never quite catches up with the question.
Well, I think that's exactly right. And then whether you view the Allagash case as evidence of alien abduction, some kind of lesson in the complexity of our memories, or something that falls somewhere in between that, it still remains one of the most fascinating intersections of UFO research and human psychology. And that may be the real mystery here, Deb. Not what happened that night, but how we decide what happened years later. Well, at least until next time when we discuss another tale yet to be told. Thanks for listening to Forever Paranormal. Follow, rate, and share the show. It helps others find us and keeps the stories coming. Step inside the crypt for archive and exclusive episodes at foreverparanormal.com. And keep up with my latest books and research at wjbrendel.com. And until next time, remember, the veil is always thinner than you think.